Hey, what's up, guys? I am Kyle. I'm here with Griffin and Cam, and we are talking about My Hero Academia. You probably know it already. It's basically the biggest shonen running right now, but it's about a guy named Deku who starts out as being unpowered. He doesn't have any powers in a world where everyone has superpowers, and he wants to be a hero really bad. And his favorite hero, All Might, basically reveals that he passes on his power to him, and then his journey begins, I guess. And mostly about him like training up, I guess, and taking on this like school UA where he learns to be a hero. So yeah, what did you guys think of this?
I do like My Hero Academia. I think like some of the fight scenes are probably some of the best shonen fight scenes, or at least animations I've seen in a really long time. The fight with Overhaul was really cool. The fight at the tournament against Bakugo and Todoroki and Midoriya as well. I think that is done by the guys that did oh gosh, what's it called, Kyle? The animation
I
for
don't
the
I don't know. I mean, the
no,
studio is Bones.
no.
They've also
They
done like
got like recruited just for that scene. Oh, they made a oh god, what is it called? Mob Psycho. They made Mob Psycho,
oh,
Oh,
nice.
yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense.
and probably some of the best animation, and the character designs are really solid. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's not super detailed or deep. Some of the villains are kind of like
Yeah.
kind of like whatever. Overhaul's a bit better. Stain is pretty good. But One for All and his disciple Shigaraki they're kind of okay, but they're not the reason I
Yeah.
watched the show.
I like I like the disciple with the hand on the face and like his whole powers and stuff like that. I think that's kind of cool, but One for All as a character is definitely just like I'm the man in the mask in the background. Like that one fight, don't get me wrong. That All Might fight was crazy. That's such an awesome part of the series for me. But yeah, I agree in the same way of My Hero just being like a really good reintroduction in the anime for people who were probably into the shonens of the 90s and early 2000s like Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, One Piece. Cuz I had a bit of a dry spell myself with anime. I didn't get super into more recent animes. I watched a lot of Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Dragon Ball as a kid, and it took a while for me to get back into the modern stuff, and My Hero was a really good gateway into that because it kind of makes me feel like a kid again while watching it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If anybody I know likes shonen or is looking to get into anime, just even a couple days ago in me and Kyle's group chat, people were like, "Oh, should I watch anime?" And I told them to watch My Hero because it's that easy to watch and it's really reminiscent of exactly what you were talking about, like Dragon Ball and all those types. And I
Mhm.
think it has a pretty big following even for people that don't typically watch anime, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
Definitely.
definitely.
Let's see.
Within my scene and stuff I do on YouTube, My Hero is a particularly popular pick for the music we make and the content that we deliver because one, the characters are just so iconic and recognizable at this point that pretty much if you follow anime to any degree, whether it's just super casually, you watch a lot of it, or you don't even really watch it, but you've walked past a hot topic before, you'll probably recognize these characters at this point just because they're so ingrained into pop culture as a whole, which I think is really cool. It's been a while since an anime has transcended the niche of anime watchers and people who watch Toonami to being something on the level of Dragon Ball and Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think a lot of it is like that it kind of came around at the right time. It basically like started like right as the some of the other like big three were ending, like as
Mhm.
Naruto was ending and Bleach was ending, and I mean Naruto especially because it's super popular here in the West, and I feel like
Yeah.
My Hero kind of really filled in that void because it's in a lot of ways like really similar to Naruto, in, like its main appeal and kind of like the I don't know like the structure of the series I guess. So yeah, I think it kind of like the reason for its popularity is like in a lot of ways because of like the timing, and basically just filled that void that like those other series that were ending, they could no longer fill.
Yeah, I completely agree that the timing is phenomenal, and it's definitely kind of sending off like a new era for anime for sure. I'm not sure what the biggest anime will be in the future, but right now, My Hero Academia definitely seems like a contender. But you know, I see why it's so popular because there are quite a few characters that I do like a lot. For one, All Might, he's a really good character. I just think that you know he's done so much for the world, and then his power is dissipating, and he has to pass on his ability. And I don't know. I think he's probably the most interesting character in the show because you deal with so much of his past, and you know he has so much weight for the future, and everyone has this big, you know, reputation for him that he just can't live up to anymore. And it's kind of like all riding on Midoriya, right? If Midoriya fails, then he kind of feels like he fails. And I think the show does a really good job of like portraying All Might's feelings towards like a world without him.
Yeah, All
Yeah,
Might's definitely my favorite character. He's just like he basically like not only that, but also he's just like so entertaining whenever he's on screen. Like he's just like kind of like it really like makes sense that this is the number one hero because like he just in the same way that like he steals the scene when he's on, it makes sense that like people would in universe like be drawn to his charisma.
yeah. And one, just from a design standpoint, he's awesome. Like they really nailed the whole like big, charismatic Superman type figure with the design, yet it still feels original and iconic to My Hero. But like you were saying, I think the concept of a superhero passes prime with a ticking clock that needs to pass on is very fresh take on, like in the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe world that we live in where superhero films and TV dominates media. This is a really cool take on that, and I have to commend uh just the creators for finding a fresh spin as opposed to just here's big superheroes teaching young superheroes, which is something we've seen before. And like even the one thing I always compared it to was the movie Sky High. Did you guys ever
Yeah,
see
Yeah.
that?
it's literally that.
Yeah, from a concept, yeah, but with All Might, it's what gives it its identity in terms of like the themes needing to step up when somebody else has passed their prime and like learning to pass the torch, but also can you be what I think is a really cool dynamic with this anime is the whole core concept is like, oh, how much of a hero can you be without powers or without being born with it? Can you work hard and still be a hero? Uh
Oh yeah,
and there's a lot I
totally.
think there's a lot to dive into there, in terms of discussion there of how the show handles that concept. But I think what's really cool is as Deku throughout the series, is given powers and is able to develop over time and become a hero through working hard with the powers. All Might's learning how to grapple with the fact that now he's going to be powerless. How can he still be a hero in a
Hmm.
world where he no longer has the powers that he once had? So I think that's a really cool dynamic.
Yeah, dude, that's like kind of why like one of probably my favorite moment in the series is like literally like way at the beginning when like Deku has to like prove to All Might that he's like worth inheriting his power, and he like cleans the beach entirely. Like that is like that moment just felt so good because you know that like Deku like worked hard, and like that was 100% from his own effort. And
Yeah.
just like seeing like the entire beach get cleared just felt so good in that like classic shonen way of like seeing it's basically a training arc. It's like even though he doesn't actually, I mean, he does get a power, like he gets like all for one as a result of that. So it's like it's a training arc kind of like in indirect way because he is given the power, but he does have to work for it. And that's what you love to see is characters working hard for shit.
I wish we had more of that, to be honest. You know,
Yeah.
when I first watched this show, I looked at Midoriya and I'd seen Hunter x Hunter recently, and I'm like, yo, this is just gone 2.0. He's like the essence of like, you know, a good boy, and everything he does is like perfect, and you know, he's got like, you know, a really good heart, I guess. But I guess like a big difference is I feel like Gon really works for a lot of his developments a lot of the time, and I think Midoriya does too. But I don't know. I feel like he does get helped a lot, and
Yeah.
I don't feel like
Hmm.
the lessons are as clear and the progress is as clear in terms of, you know, creating results for his power development. You know, he'll learn something or two because I'm All Might will tell him, but I don't think he's put in stressful enough situations where he really has to critically think and develop his power. There's a couple moments, like, you know, the tournament where he's, you know, using all of his appendages possible. But I
Yeah.
don't even know if I like that message. Just like break yourself until you can't, you know, go any further. I don't know. I feel like they could have cleaned up Midoriya's progression a little bit, but overall, I do like the idea of somebody having this power that they can't control, and, you know, really needing to figure out how to use it, but maybe a little bit cleaner, I guess. I don't know.
I agree in terms of that, and I think that Deku as a character definitely has his flaws. Uh,
Hmm.
Particularly he's a little crybaby,
Yeah.
and that can get really annoying. Uh, Throughout, and sometimes hard to track his progress when he does something really cool and badass, and then one episode later is back to crying because like he got hurt or is nervous to talk to somebody or something. It's yeah, it's very good boy little crybaby tropey. As a
Yeah.
character, I will say there are select moments, in my opinion, throughout the series where he does step up and show his progress and what he learned in like the different tactics he learned from the different trainers that he's had throughout the different seasons, and shown that he is smart, capable, and can work through things. And they make it there is somewhat of a satisfaction to his payoffs
That's
when
true.
he's not being a crybaby for once. It's like, oh my god, he's doing something. It's cool.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing as well is because uh my hero being very much an ensemble piece with, you know, 20 supporting characters just within the class itself. Uh a lot of times the characters around Deku are interesting enough or fun enough that you kind of can shrug away whenever he's being a little bit of a crybaby because he's like, "Oh, but Bakugo's doing something funny or Todoroki's being cool over there." So like there's always something happening within the series even if Deku's kind of being lame.
Yeah, I mean, there's like definitely a reason why like the typical shonen protagonist has like, that like wide-eyed, like go-getter attitude that's just always kind of like rushing into trouble because that just sort of like leads to the most interesting like situations for them to be in. That's kind of why I feel like it's a little bit of like a misstep for Deku not to be that. I mean, like I know it's kind of weird that I'm just basically saying, oh, like Deku should just follow the same tropes that like the other shows
Mhm.
do, but like it kind of works for a reason, like this like going against that like I don't know. I feel like we've kind of discussed already like where it's been a problem, and I feel like I don't know, maybe a different kind of personality for Deku might I don't know alleviate that a little bit.
What this is from some I haven't watched too much recent anime. I've gotten a lot back into it recently this past 2 years, but up to this point, like I took like a huge gap off. What are
Hmm.
some examples of characters that you think kind of do Deku's trope better in
Gone.
terms of like
Gone in Hunter
Gon?
x Hunter. That's what I was trying to
I
say earlier. I guess just by comparison, he's just worse. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at. And I think it might just be the variety of situations now that I'm thinking about it more. Deku, I feel like, is always just attacked by villains by going to high school. But Gon has like a fucking mission and he's traveling all over the world to all these dangerous places, fighting the craziest villains. And it's like on his own initiative. It feels like Gon is like being cornered by all these obstacles, where it feels
yeah.
like Gon is really like looking to fight these people and like destroy them. And his ambition is just a little bit more impressive. But Kyle, do you have any other
Yeah.
examples? That's the only one I can think
Well, I
of.
mean, just to kind of add on to this, like I feel like the big difference between like Gon and Deku in terms of like their goals is that like Gon's goal is like a lot more concrete. It's like I want to find my dad, and where like Deku's goal like to be the number one hero, that's just like it's such like a vague, it's like, what does that really entail? Like that could basically happen whenever the author felt like it was necessary to like just end the series, because it's like so like undefined. Whereas like with Gon's Goal, it's like every time, like basically every arc he kind of like gets like a new kind of like clue, or like a new like lead onto like finding his dad. So like every arc we feel the sense of progression, and it feels like there's like a lot more, as Griffin said, like forward momentum towards the goal, because the goal is clear and well defined, and we're like constantly taking steps forward towards it. Whereas like in this show, I feel like that's definitely like less the case. As Griffin was saying, it's like more reactionary. Like he's just like going to school, which is like, yeah, like that's getting him closer to his goal, but it's kind of like in a more like vague, undefined way. And then like all of like the villains that he has to fight are just like because they attack him, rather than him seeking out situations where there are villains.
That's a really good point that I think I was kind of thinking of, but didn't know how to properly verbalize, which I think the right word is agency, because Deku doesn't really have
Definitely.
much
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
agency in what he does. It is very much something happens to him, so he has to overcome something, as opposed to he's trying to get something and then encounters an obstacle. Because it's
Yeah.
not like he's taking a step to become the number one. I mean, going to school is is what he's doing to try to do that. But it's not like every step like he takes is like, oh, this will be the next step in my mission, and then an obstacle comes in. It's I'm
Hmm.
at school. Oh, villains are attacking. We gotta uh, overcome all of that stuff. I think actually the best times that Deku shines is during school stuff where villains aren't involved, because that's when it's like, okay, we know his mission. It's to, pass the class so he can like keep being a hero. Like that's a very basic goal, like that we can all understand and is very attainable, but he has to take steps to do. So like when he's doing the mission in the building and he has to fight Bakugo, like we know exactly what he has to do is like, oh, he has to go uh save the hostage, or I forget exactly what the scene is, and then Bakugo's the obstacle there, and he knows he has to beat and fight Bakugo on the spot. uh and then you get the basic story structure of character goal conflict and then he's a cool character all of a sudden.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. Like when the show does that, it's definitely better than when he's more reactionary.
Hmm.
I was just gonna say, like, speaking of Bakugo, what do you guys like think of the supporting cast? There's a couple standouts to me, like, obviously the ones that just get more attention and more screen time and actually have character development, which is not the entire class, unfortunately. But people like
Yeah.
Bakugo, Todoroki, Uravity, Red Riot, and Ida, I think are actually all pretty good supporting characters. I just feel like, sometimes they kind of just like put Grape Rush on the screen, and I'm like, okay, like he's horny, like we get it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't really know anything about him, and it's the same with like so many of the other ones, and I'm just like, I don't really care because I don't know anything about you. You haven't grown, you haven't developed.
Yeah, some of these guys, like, I don't know, the tail guy, it's like, all right, I don't know you. Who
What a
are you?
lame
Like,
power too. What a lame
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
power.
So, some of those are just completely lames, but even the ones that we don't know too much about, like Tokuyami, I believe, the Dark Shadow guy,
Yeah.
like he's just cool from a design standpoint, and like his power and stuff like that's just cool. Like, so even though we don't get to see much of him and him develop and stuff like that, it's cool whenever he's on screen versus somebody like Sero, who's like, okay, he shoots tape. That's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of feel like the problem is that like we are introduced to all of these characters like way too fast. Like we're basically just thrown into a classroom full of all of these people, and like they don't really like, when they're introduced, they're not introduced like doing stuff. They're just introduced as like, oh, like these are your classmates. And so it's just like I don't have like a reason to like care about them instantly. So I feel like a lot of times when they're just on screen, I feel like my time is like being wasted, because I'd rather be spending time with like All Might, or like characters that I actually care about, you know?
Hmm.
Like I feel like it's just like too big of a cast. And like whenever there's like a character that shows up and they're just sort of like, I don't know, just they show up to like drop a couple lines or something instead of like doing something cool. It's like, why aren't you doing something cool? Like I'd rather just like see you like do something that makes me care about you, rather than just like further pushing that down the road. I feel like that was kind of like the problem with a lot of like the characters, is that like we're not immediately given reasons to care about them. And I would rather them just like, I guess it's kind of just like a fault of the premise, because like we kind of have to be introduced to all of the classmates, I guess. But like I would much rather have it be like we are gradually introduced to characters like as they like are given time to like do things, because then I would like I would care about them as they're introduced, as opposed to like me kind of feeling like my time's being wasted whenever they're on screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of solutions to it, and they just didn't choose any of them, and it's kind of upsetting.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that they're still going for, like, how many times have we seen like the title cards that pop up for these characters, like whenever
Oh
they're
my
on
god,
screen
so
with
many
their power?
times.
I think
Yeah.
that's always a weird. Now I think it's a uh at the start of a season I get it, because the new episode came out and they had everybody's title card again. And I was like,
Hmm.
really? We're doing this again? But I get it, like, oh, if it's been over a year since you've seen any of these characters and stuff, like, all right, here's your reminder of who's who, because there's 20 of them.
Yeah.
That's that side I get when it's a new season. But I remember, like, the first time I binged the whole series in like a few weeks, and like how many times I saw each person's title card. Like, you can make a drinking game out of it. It's eh, I think,
Yeah.
like, another example, if you guys have seen that Suicide Squad movie from a few years ago,
Yeah.
Yeah. I
they
actually
do the
fell asleep
same
during that
exact
movie.
thing at the beginning, where they just tell you what each character is with like a title card, and it
Uh-huh.
becomes very hard to care about certain ones, because they're not doing anything cool. It's just like, this is the Crocodile Man. He's a crocodile. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, all right, like, show don't tell. And
Yeah.
that's why I think the school stuff almost is always cooler than like the villain stuff for this cast. Don't get me wrong, some of the villain stuff is really cool. But for this cast, I always like when they're doing an event, like the race or like the capture the flag stuff, because they're showing like their personalities and how they use their powers to problem solve. Whereas, like, uh, what almost would have been a cooler thing is if on like the first day of classes they had to do like a capture the flag event, and that's how you see everybody's power like
Yeah,
worked
exactly.
out in a actual action scenario, versus like, this guy can explode things.
Yeah,
Yeah, I totally
there's.
agree.
I was just gonna say real quick, that there is something wrong with your cast if you have to introduce who everyone is. At season
Yeah.
5, we know who
Yeah.
everyone is, and
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like maybe they even know that they haven't done enough to properly introduce everyone. I don't know. That was bizarre.
I
Yeah.
literally, as we're speaking, I have everybody's picture and named pull up, just because there's probably 5 of these whose names I just genuinely don't know. Up to after 5 seasons, I still don't really know their names.
Yeah. And that's like
So
a problem, because I feel like we've been like we should have like if the focus of the show was to be like an ensemble cast, like what, 90 episodes, like that's like enough time to like know and like at least care a little bit about 20 characters. But I just feel like the show hasn't gotten there yet. Like I feel like it's just not going to get there. Like there are just certain characters like in the class that are just never going to be important. But then it's like, why would you like have them have screen time at all then? It's like, why would I like I don't want to like watch non-important characters do things. And so it's like, if at this point like we basically committed to some characters not being important, like why don't we just have like a narrative reason to like write them out of the show or something? Like why don't we just like have something where it's like, okay, like now the class is going to get like thinned out and only like the real ones are going to stay, because that would like actually give some like serious like stakes to some of the school stuff. Because like I do like the school stuff, and that like it's like one of the few situations where all of the cast members get to shine. But I think that it's kind of like bad because there's like no real stakes. It's always like, oh, it's just for a class, so like no one's gonna like die here or whatever. And it just like it kind of like robs it of like the stakes that like an actual like villain fight has, because it's like this person is trying to like kill the heroes. So
But
yeah,
then
I don't know.
sometimes in the villain fight, like half the cast is like on the bench, like at the summer camp.
Exactly.
Half of them were just like,
yeah,
okay, well, I guess we're just staying in here and watching everybody else fight. And I
Yeah.
was like, why would you write it that way? Because it's too hard to write in the 20 characters you've created. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are people that I like Bakugo and Deku. I for a while I thought their relationship was kind of cringy. I thought Bakugo was kind of cringy. I'm like, dude, this guy's just angry. And then they had that fight, like in one of the test cities for the yeah,
Yeah.
like test cities in the high school, and they actually had like a pretty strong emotional moment there where they kind of uncovered where some of their resentment came from, and they basically agreed to try to beat each other. And I think moving forward, the relationship I've actually liked because it's more in the nature of competition and not in the nature of just anger for no reason. I don't know. But that was really good development. And Todoroki and Midoriya kind of had a similar vibe at the Hero Festival. I mean, at the Hero for the Hero tournament, the bracket. Thought that
Yeah.
was really good. And then you also got to see the Endeavor All Might kind of competition. So they do put in the time when they feel like it. I just wish they'd give us some different perspectives. I guess if you're gonna keep everyone on.
Yeah, and it's only for select characters, which is fine. You have the protagonist, you have the deuteragonists. Uh, like that makes sense that some supporting characters are just not going to get time. Like I doubt we're ever gonna really learn what makes Sero tick, but
Yeah.
the or get a really cool dynamic between him and Bakugo. But I do have respect for I think the Bakugo and Midoriya stuff. uh like you said, I was the same way. I'm like, God, man, Bakugo is just mean for like no reason. And then like now that it's like okay, well, he was angry that somebody that he thought he was better than all of his life is all of a sudden was just like given something and gets to be ahead of him. Like I get the resentment there. And now it's like a competition thing of like, now I have to mutually respect you, and I hate that, but I have to do that. I think that's a cool dynamic. And I think the concept of uh Midoriya and Todoroki having that dynamic where Endeavor basically created Todoroki like to become the strongest hero. Like he's basically a test tube baby, like he's an experiment. And All Might in theory did something very similar by giving the power to Midoriya, somebody he believed in, but one was more of a wholesome, I believe in you, you could pass this on, and the other was a quest for true power. And
Hmm.
so that dynamic of Todoroki being like, I was bred for this versus Midoriya's like, oh, I was given this gift, I think is a really cool dynamic and how they open each other up.
Yeah. I also really just like the dynamic between like Endeavor and All Might. Just because like I think that like it's interesting with like with Endeavor kind of being someone who it seems like he's kind of characterized as he had to like work harder to get to the number two spot than All Might did to get to the number one spot. Because like All Might, like there's like a line where Deku was like, "Oh, were you ever like at a point where you were like destroying your body after you got the power?" And All Might was like, "No, like I never had that problem." And so like, but meanwhile, like Endeavor is like still seething for being like number two, um, and like he had to like work really really hard in order to get there, and he's like still trying to like surpass someone who was just like has so much more natural talent than him. So yeah, I like the dynamic between like Endeavor and All Might quite a bit, and I like how we get like a little bit more of that like after like when they have the conversation after All Might retires. That was like a good moment too.
It actually puts Endeavor in a really interesting spot because he never gets to achieve his goal, and he is the number one hero, but he doesn't feel like he deserves it. And he's not as powerful as All Might, and he's not as charismatic as All Might, and he has to
Hmm.
basically take on the role. And this thing that he's always wanted and he's always been fighting for, I think he's starting to realize like he doesn't even know if he's up for it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a tough situation. I actually almost feel bad for him, but given
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel bad for him. I mean, he's an asshole for sure, but like I can at least empathize with that. It's kind of similar to like Bakugo. Like I definitely like empathize with like the stuff that you were talking about being like surpassed by someone who you were always better than and like having to deal with that. But at the same time, like that doesn't make all of like Bakugo like bullying Deku when they were kids or even now. Like that doesn't make that justified.
No.
So it's like yeah, like he's still an asshole, but at least you you can kind of see like why, I guess, or not. It's not a justification, but it's still, like a reason.
Yeah. I think what makes Endeavor even cooler is once, like you said, he never gets the goal of becoming better than All Might. He never achieves that because All Might has to, he wins by default, which is not the way he wanted it to happen.
Hmm.
And that sucks for him. Again, he's an asshole, but it sucks for like, wow, I worked my entire life for this, and now like, I won the participation trophy. And but seeing how he's he's so, he's arrogant, he's greedy, he's an asshole, but he's still a hero, and that shows in like how he's willing to put all of that aside and still step up to duty when that Nomu attack happened at the end of the last season, and he
Hmm.
still was willing to sacrifice his body, put himself through the ringer, and put all of the side stuff uh behind him just to make sure that the city was safe and he did his job as the number one hero. So that really brought a whole nother level of, you have to respect something about this character. And I think
Yeah.
that's cool that they were able to take a typical asshole dad character, which is very easy to box Endeavor into for his first few appearances, and then make him like, well, he still does his job.
Yeah.
One interesting plot point with Endeavor is just kind of how we get to see a little peek into how the like hero ranking system works a little bit. I don't know why, but ever since One Punch Man, I thought that kind of mechanic is so cool. Just because
Yeah.
it typically is so wrong. Because like Saitama was like what ranked as like a C class hero, and he's like the strongest guy in the universe. And then all the guys up on the podium, the guys and gals going up for their respective ratings, they're all like, this is BS. Some of them were like, oh, thank you very much, but the winged guy was just like, none of this means anything, and I don't care about this. And then he like throws a couple shots at Endeavor, and I think that we learned that that was kind of to kind of edge Endeavor to try harder, but still, I'd like to learn more about like the political aspect of all of the top heroes. I think that kind of stuff is interesting.
Yeah, and I just love the world that they set it in with, like, I think it's a very cool dynamic, like, oh, the superheroes are professional superheroes, and One Punch Man does a very similar thing, and I think it's a great concept of, there are regular people. It just so happens, like, how do we deal with the fact that there are people who can just, wave their fingers and kill people running around the streets? How do we regulate that? How do we turn that into a thing? And then making them like professional athletes, but for superheroes, I think it's just a really cool concept as a whole. And I think My Hero does a good job of diving into it in their own way, where it feels distinct from One Punch Man, both in tone and just in concept. But they both do something that I enjoy watching from a creative standpoint.
Yeah, I kind of wish. I mean, it makes sense like why like our main characters aren't on the rankings because they're still students. But I kind of wish that they like were, just because that would kind of give us more of like an investment, I guess, in the rankings. Because basically, like after, I mean, All Might is like basically the only one that you really know or care about for like the
Yeah.
majority of the show, and it's like it's a given that he's going to be number one forever. Like as long as he's like still able to like be punching bad guys, like he's going to be number one. And so it's like um, now I guess like is the only point where like the rankings are like in question, I guess. But it's just like so many of them were just like kind of like the same problem we were talking about earlier, like characters that only really showed up or like did stuff like a couple times, except for Endeavor. But yeah, so I don't know. I feel like the rankings are like it's like classic. You want to like know who's the most powerful and stuff like that. But like I don't know. Like hopefully we'll get more of like actual characters that we're invested in, like climbing the rankings, because that's what I like would like to see in order to like care about it.
Yeah, one thing I thought was cool in the beginning was they were kind of doing something like that for the students when they had them ranked, is like, Deku, you're last place.
Oh
Like,
yeah, they had that.
and then that was only like day one, and then they never really addressed that ever again. I think that would have been a cool concept of like, you know, they're all teammates, they all have to work together, they're all heroes, but the competitive aspect of like, hey, at the end of the day, you're all going to be trying to make a living being heroes. It's not just about being like a hero, you also have to be the best one, you have to make a living doing it. Uh which is something that like going through college I personally experienced in terms of like uh, doing group projects with people, but also needing to be competitive with them and being like, okay, we're all competing for spots here. We're all working together on certain projects, but at the end of the day, like, one person's going to be the director of this project, and then one person's going to be like just a side role that nobody cares about. And so I think that's a really cool thing that they could dive into with these characters of, how you do in school reflects how you're going to do in life. So people try really hard to both work together, but also stand out as the best.
Yeah. But also just like again, bring more like stakes to the school stuff. Because that was like I said, my biggest problem is that like whenever there was like school stuff, it never really felt like anything was on the line. Like the tournament was just basically to show off for like pro heroes and stuff, but there was like nothing bad that would happen if you didn't if you didn't do well or if you didn't like place in the tournament. So
I think for the tournament wasn't the whole thing like, oh, you won't get an internship if you don't do well in the you won't get sponsored or whatever if you
yeah, but
don't
then
do
pretty
well in
much
the tournament.
everybody gets in. Well, there was also this thing where like this guy was like, "Oh, like if I do well, then I'll transfer into the hero course," and like they
I
might
know
make people transfer out of the hero
they
course,
should have done
but
that.
nothing came of that.
They should have
No,
done
no
that.
one had to transfer out.
And then the
And then like
threats from
also,
Eraserhead as well. He was going to drop someone, and then he ended up not doing it. That'd have been
yeah,
cool if
that
they would have
happens like
dropped
all
someone.
the time in this show where like Eraserhead will like say, "Oh, like something like I'm gonna, you guys are gonna get expelled or something, or like bad shit's gonna happen," and literally like our class is like exactly the same, completely unaffected by all of those threats. So it's just like, yeah, it's there's just no stakes for a lot of like the school stuff, which
Yeah.
is probably my
The
biggest
one
problem
time
with
there
it.
was actually stakes for the school stuff was their license exams, and Bakugo and Todoroki didn't get it. Like they couldn't do the provisional licenses. I'm like, okay, that's actually at least they actually went through with a hey, if you don't do this correctly, there's consequences, and then boom, there's consequences. Two of the arguably most powerful heroes are the only ones who don't get to go out and advance. And so I'm interested in seeing how they'll play with the fact that two of them are still on provisional courses. Like if they have to grapple with the idea of oh they're falling behind even though they're the most powerful, if that's going to affect their characters in any way. I hope it would like create a little bit of stakes in a dynamic where these side characters become even more interesting. But I don't know if anything's going to come out of it.
Yeah, just something. I mean, I'd like to see this just anywhere at all, but that's a good spot where I'd like to see some stakes. Maybe make them actually have some real setbacks other than just. I guess the setback that we saw was just them being on the sidelines while a couple other heroes got to get the provisional license, and then we saw that whole overhaul fight. And I guess the stake is they
Yeah.
just got left out of that, and I'd kind of like to see a little bit more of a, I don't know, a punishment or some people dropped or
Yeah.
transferred out.
It
And
kind of
I
seemed like it was a way, like it was like an excuse for them not to be in that arc. Because it's like if they were like if they had their licenses, like they would probably call those two in because they're like some of the most powerful like characters in the class. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I think it was just kind of like an excuse for them not to be there, which is like, I don't know. Like I can kind of see what the author's doing.
What did you guys think of that season 4? I mean, that's the last thing we saw before our latest episode. I like season 4 a lot. I think Overhaul's the best villain. I think Lemillion like really what he did and what happened to him actually is actually probably one of the more interesting things in the show, and that he's kind of like
Yeah.
reverse roles with Midoriya, right? And he's having to cope without like arguably one of the best powers at UA. Like phasing through stuff and even when he didn't have his abilities, though, he was still able to match Overhaul, which I think is really setting him up to be one of the most important and most powerful heroes later on. But they got a lot of those as well. They have so many of these just like crazy powerful heroes. It's going to be interesting to see if they actually weed any of them out. because it's like Bakugo, Midoriya, Todoroki, Lemillion. That's four really powerful dudes that could kill the final boss at any moment, right? And I think any of them could have killed Overhaul, and it just happened to be Midoriya. But regardless, I really like season four. Actually, probably my favorite.
Yeah, Lemillion is like right up there with All Might for me as like one of like the like actually like good and like fleshed out characters in the show. Like I love well, first of all, the fact that like he basically has like one of the worst quirks, but he like turns it into one of the best ones.
That's a good
Because
point.
like his quirk is like literally that like he has like no control over like what he's phasing through things. Like all he can do is just like decide which parts of his body are going to phase, and then it's like they just fall essentially. So if his entire body was like phasing through stuff, then like he would just fall straight to like the core of the earth. And like he can't even breathe when like his lungs are being phased. So it's like whenever he like does like one of those like cool slippy moves where he like slips under the ground, like he's literally like holding his breath. And if he wants to do that for a long time, he's basically like experiencing hell on earth because he just like isn't breathing for like a long period of time. And so like the fact that he was able to like turn this quirk, like when we see in the flashback of like his dad being like, "Oh yeah, like I don't know if you can really be a hero because our quirk kind of sucks." But like he basically like explains how he's able to like, "Oh, if I like angle myself like as I like go in or like I have some initial velocity as I like start to slip through the earth, then when I like turn it off and I like bounce up, then I'll like come up with like super speed and I'll be able to do a cool punch." Like that is like cool like tactical thinking of like a quirk, and like being able to like just being able to go from like a garbage quirk to like one of like the big three, one of the most powerful students in the class or in the whole school was awesome. And so like I honestly think like Lemillion should have been the protagonist, like and not Deku. Like the show,
Yeah.
what was his name? Night Eye was literally right and correct when he said that like he should inherit All for One because dude, like he's already shown that like he's super capable at like controlling his quirk. Like he's super charismatic. Like he could definitely fill in like those gaps of like All Might as like his character. And like yeah, he's just great. And that's why like I immediately like after like seeing his personality and like seeing hearing him explain his quirk and like how much thought he has to do for like doing these cool moves and like how much work he had to put in, I just like immediately loved him. And so that's why like when he like actually ended up losing his power in the fight with Overhaul, I was like, holy shit, this is like one of the most emotional points in the show. Like that's like a real character drama because he had to like it's not like the quirk was something that was just I mean it was given to him, but like he did so much with that foundation and now it's just been like pulled out from under him. So yeah, like Lemillion was definitely like I was like surprised at that point in the show that like there would be like a new character that I would like as much as like All Might, and I definitely feel like Lemillion was an awesome character.
And I think that's why we like Lemillion so much. Uh, is the role that he has in the greater story. Because, who's to say that My Hero would be as beloved and as popular if they used a character like Lemillion as the protagonist from the start? Because you could picture it. You could be like, it would actually be really cool if there was a series where it starts out with him with his powers and he figured
Hmm.
everything out. And then boom, in the middle of the fight within the first few episodes, he loses his powers and then has to deal with that, then meets All Might, then like basically does the whole Deku role of, well, you already worked this hard with all like you got these powers, you worked for all this stuff. Now you're gonna have to basically start from scratch, but you're so good at this already and have so much charisma, you're the right pick for this. You could picture that as probably a really freaking cool anime.
Yeah.
But, I think because he exists in this world that My Hero has built out, a world where we've seen Deku, uh, the reason we like Lemillion is because that's what we want Deku to be. And I think that's intentional as, like, there's a reason Deku's the protagonist and not a Lemillion, is because we need Deku to work towards something. And I know technically he's working towards being All Might, but now we see, hey, here's a student that's embodying everything that he needs to be. Here's like something he can do within a short term versus like All Might, who's been the greatest hero for decades. So I think that makes it a really cool dynamic for Deku to hopefully develop and not be as much of a baby and be more like a Lemillion character.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fair.
I think Lemillion fills an important role in this show, and he definitely is a motivation for what Midoriya can be in the next few years. And I also agree that that would be a really cool show, but it just, like what you were talking about, it wouldn't fit the My Hero aesthetic of, he'd be too perfect, he'd be too good, where Deku has nothing and he needs to build himself up into everything. And I think Lemillion, even if he got One for All, it would still be too easy for him. There was a couple other moments in season 4 that I guess characters that I really liked. What's the guy that can eat anything and then he can become that power?
Fat Gum. No, 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 no.
He's
That's not
one of the
that.
big three.
That's I forget his name, but yeah,
I don't remember his
he
name
was in
either.
the
Sun
first
Eater.
episode
Sun
of
Eater
Five.
is his name. Sun Eater.
Sun Eater.
Sun Eater has one of the coolest powers that I've seen, and I really liked that they allowed us to like go with Red Riot for a bit, right? We got his backstory with the acid girl, and how he was kind of like a loser who didn't understand his quirk in high school, and he's actually really similar to Midoriya in that way. And then he started with not understanding his quirk at all, and he actually trained it himself, which I guess would be better than Midoriya even. And and then he goes into school and he changes his look, which I thought was a cool detail, that he's like reinventing himself in high school, which I think is something a lot of kids kind of like fantasize about. And he comes in and he gets to work with Fat Gum, and I really like Fat Gum and his power when he like loses all of his fat and he's just like a regular dude. I thought that was a really cool detail. But his fight, Fat Gum and Red Riot, fighting against the fighter guy and the shield barrier guy. I don't think they're important enough to know their names, but that was a pretty cool fight. And Red Riot, he tried his best, but he ultimately like kind of did fail. But I thought that Fat Gum definitely had a pretty emotional moment there, where it kind of seemed like all was lost, but he pulled the 180 on him.
What do you guys really hope to see out of season 5 and hope to avoid moving forward? Because it looks like season 5 is going to start with very much a school arc before we get into. Now, I don't read the manga or anything. And if you guys do read it, no spoilers, please.
Yeah, no, I don't think either of us do.
No, I don't.
If what do you hope to see in terms of like stuff branching outside of the school arc, and like what do you hope we avoid that we've seen in previous seasons?
That's a good question.
I would like to see, like, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that the show's like biggest problem is probably like the I don't know, like the character, like the personality problem, I guess, like of like the big cast. So I would like to see like more of like the other members of the school like do cool stuff, because we haven't, like, for the ones that we haven't, like, I think that like the Red Riot one is probably like I would like to see more stuff like that, I guess,
Me
of
too.
like a character, whereas like I previously didn't really care about Red Riot at all. I just kind of thought that he was like a knockoff Bakugo. Um, and like we got like I feel like it wasn't like the best thing in the world or whatever. It's not like I like him as much as I was gushing about Lemillion earlier, but at least it's something. So like I would like to see more of that, I guess. I would also just like to see more of Lemillion, because I like Lemillion a lot. So I mean, I think he doesn't have his powers right now, so I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get more of him. But maybe he'll eventually get him back. I wouldn't be surprised. They've kind of like left that door open with the little girl having her like rewind power.
I would I don't know. I kind of liked the political climate that it's kind of left in season 4, and that All Might is definitely gone, and that there is evil afoot that we don't know if we can deal with. And I kind of like that the world around them has this, increasing amount of instability, because that means that our heroes are going to be presented with more difficult challenges soon, and potentially challenges that actually, maybe someone in UA, can't take it anymore. Maybe the villains that are fighting and that are growing in popularity are too strong, and maybe there's a couple close calls and somebody quits UA, or maybe somebody has to, maybe somebody turns into a villain, because it's becoming more popular, and I'd kind of like to see more of that side of the world, because I think that will lead into some actual stakes for the show. Maybe spending some more time developing that like quirk erasing drug. I know that Shigaraki has it now, and he's probably going to attack the school again, right? But maybe some more quirks erased. I don't know. I'd like to see, as well as what Kyle was saying, like actual perspectives of these other heroes, right? I think what we did with Red Riot last season was great, and there's plenty more characters to do that for, and just generally more stakes. I think we talked about that earlier, but I want to see some people not suffer, but have to go through some pretty difficult changes, like Lemillion did. Like, he's great now. He's in such a complex spot, but you really feel for him, and I can't say that a lot about many of the characters on the show.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat where I think they've been building up to a lot of stuff with the One for All versus the All for One, which, in the teaser for episode 2, they said, "Hey, this is what the next episode's going to start building on," which I think is really interesting and really cool, because this has just kind of been, we've seen the fight scenes with All Might, we've seen some basic explanation and stuff like that, and the history of it. But what that's going to pan out to today is like, who's going to be Deku's big villain? Is like, a lot of the people Deku has fought is kind of felt like they haven't really been a foil to him. It's been more of a uh everybody was after All Might, and then Deku got involved by proxy. Is like, who is Deku gonna really have to,
He needs an
uh
objective for sure.
yeah, who is Deku gonna have to take on, because of the nature of his situation, is because now he is the one for all user, and it seems like maybe the All for One is going to come back into it. Is it going to be passed down? Is it going to be given to somebody else? Who's going to become, the antithesis to Deku? So that's something that I think will really give Deku some more identity, as somebody really that he, like, on the other side of the spectrum that he compares himself to. He's got somebody like Lemillion now on the good side that he's like, okay, this is what I'm striving to be, somebody like this. But now, who is the one on the opposite side of the spectrum that can show the dark side of his situation, like what he could become if he were to, you know, be a bad guy, abuse his power, and specifically in his situation, not just a like, oh, what if Bakugo turns bad? Which sure might be a cool situation. It's like the very classic, oh, Vegeta's bad for this season, or Sasuke's bad for this arc. Uh, which I wouldn't be surprised if they do at one point. But I do think creating a character for Deku to be his foil on the other side is going to really give him some identity as a hero.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm all on board for that. Let's see if they do it. I hope they
Yeah.
do.
Well, can only wait till the next episode, and then the 20 after that.
Yeah, honestly, that first episode of season 5 was a little disappointing to me. It's just stuff we've already
Yeah.
seen. I mean, there was some funny moments though when Lemillion like got saved and then he just jumped right back into the water, and he was
Yeah.
like, "I want to make them as strong as hero as possible," and he just did it in a really funny way.
Yeah, it felt that first episode felt like a really long like anime opening, almost, of like, remember all these guys, here they are,
Yeah.
and now we
Yeah.
can
There
get
was like
into it.
no progression or anything like that
Oh my
towards like any
god.
greater goal.
Oh.
Nothing new like that we haven't seen. It's like, okay, we've seen all their powers. We know what they can do.
That's why I
Um,
think this is going to be like a school arc for like the little opening few episodes. It's just going to be school stuff, and then soon they'll introduce the big threat, and then actually have another overhaul type beat.
Oh god, they didn't even learn anything really in that episode. Like no one like had a realization. It almost seemed,
no.
and like they weren't even trying. Like Sun Eater was like, I don't want to be here. So it was basically
Yeah.
that one girl versus everyone. And then Bakugo just like blew someone up because he's Bakugo. And it's fine. Like it's okay. Like I get the theme of the show. It's fun. But you gotta start picking it up here. So I'm hopeful for the rest of the season. I think there's a lot of potential. Just kind of what we were talking about. But overall, you know, nothing's certain.
Yep.
You guys want to go ahead and just give a rating for? I guess we'll just do up to the point. I guess yeah, just all that's out for now. We usually do ratings. So I'll just go ahead and go first, unless anybody else had anything they want to talk about in regards to the show.
Um, oh, I mean, the only other thing that I really wanted to say is that Overhaul like is just really fucked up. Like we kind of talked about how he was like a good villain, but like what he was doing to the little girl, where he was basically just like killing her over and over again and like using his quirk to like revive her so that he could like do these experiments on her. Like that is like super fucking dark and like Jesus Christ, did it make me hate Overhaul. So that was like a good point for like I like the like super edgy shit for like these villains because it gives me a real reason to hate them. So yeah, like I like yeah, I mean you already said that you liked Overhaul, but yeah, I just wanted to add that that was probably some of the most fucked up shit that we've seen in the series so far.
I agree.
Yeah, I felt bad for Eri. They did a good job,
When,
like making an
when she,
actual damsel in distress. That I was like, holy shit, you need to save this girl as fast as possible.
I
Yeah.
know when, and like I'm not gonna lie, like I was totally tearing up when she was smiling at the end when they did the whole like dance number in the song at the talent show or whatever, and she starts smiling. It's like, look, she's smiling, guys. And I'm like, oh, Ari, like
Yeah, that was a lot.
that was so
Yeah.
cute. I was like, oh, she's been through so much, and she just likes the singing and the dancing. That's why I like the fun. That's why I like the school stuff because it can just get so wholesome. And so I'm like, this is what I like is we just had Overhaul, we just had the the ripping apart the little girl and bringing her back together torture scenes. Let's have her smile and have a little singing and dancing with all of the friends.
And it's really
So
cute that like Lemillion is like basically her dad now. Like I couldn't think of a more perfect character to be her dad.
yeah, it's great. And that makes you love Lemillion that much more.
All right. If there's nothing else, then I guess we could just hop right into ratings. For me, My Hero Academia is probably a 6.5 out of 10. I think it's a pretty solid shonen. It covers a lot of the bases of what a shonen needs, and it has hype moments, emotional moments, and overall, it's just a lot of fun to watch. But it just kind of lacks in depth, and it's overcrowded. Really, there's a lot going on, and for some reason, they kind of just I don't think they use their time well. I think that the amount of characters and the amount of world that they developed in 90 episodes isn't sufficient, and it's leaving me wanting more. And this anime could go on for hundreds of more episodes, so I guess we have time. But I rather get it sooner than later. So I'm definitely hopeful for this show. There are some really really excellently written characters, and I'd like to focus more on them and less on the less excellently or not even written characters. And yeah, that's my thoughts on the show. I do like the show. A 6.5 is not a bad score.
Yeah, I mean, for like, yeah, if like five is the average, like I would probably give this like a six as well. Like I do think it's like it's not a bad shonen. Like it does hit a lot of like the marks. It has like the hype moments. It's got like the sense of progression that you want to see out of like a shonen. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about like the problems that the show has. Like I think that probably like the biggest one is like the just like the huge cast and like the lack of um characterization and like lack of interesting things to do for most of them. It kind of and makes me like feel like, as I said, that like I am just not really getting anything out of it when the non-important characters are on screen. So it's like, why have them at all? Um, and then like, well, I guess like, yeah, just it's like kind of you know it does like hit all of the marks, so it's like satisfying to watch. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of like just that, like there's not like a lot more to it than other than just like hitting the shonen tropes and doing it like pretty well. So yeah, like a 6 out of 10. Like like at sometimes like it's really good, but then at other times I just feel like it's I like it struggles to hold my interest, I guess. So
Yeah,
yeah,
gotcha. Yeah, I was gonna say 7 out of 10 just out of the pure enjoyment factor that I get for it, as much as I can critically break it apart. You know, I had a very enjoyable experience watching this anime and really kind of reliving why I like shonens, but also helping me get back into anime as a whole. However, after, you know, really discussing it and the stuff, especially what you were saying about how they use their time, uh like how little can happen in one episode, like, you know, I agree with that 100%. I'd probably, from a more objective standpoint, would go down more to a 6.5, just because there's enough annoying about the show that you notice how slow it progresses sometimes, or how nothing happens in certain episodes, because, you know, the title cards, the recaps, like, sometimes you only get like 10 minutes of new content in an episode, and that can get really annoying really fast. So yeah, I'd say 6.5. Love the show, enjoy it so much, but definitely, you know, far from perfect, but a great way to like sit down and enjoy anime if you're not for anyone really, but if you're, especially if you're like, I liked these old shonen, like, what's the modern take on it?
Yeah, we didn't even mention the recaps. I completely forgot about that. The recaps are a little much sometimes.
yeah.
They go on for some time. But I mean, if that's it, um, it's a good episode. Follow us on Twitch, Twitter, Spotify, YouTube. They should all be Anime Soirée, except for the Twitch. And I know I've said this for 3 weeks in a row now, but I'll get that new Twitch up someday. And I guess that's it. We're signing off.